Hello and welcome to Veeam Backup for Salesforce demo series, explaining how the product works. I have already installed the product, so now I'm going to show you how to create and configure a backup policy. Using the Backup tab, you can see the list of the policies configured in the application, depending on your user account permission scope. So let's create a new policy right now. If you haven't connected this application to a specific Salesforce organization which you plan to protect, you must do it now. The very first step would be to select org type and authenticate yourself using Salesforce login and password. Veeam recommends using a specific service account, as it's much better for security reasons, but for demo purposes I'll stick to my user account for now. When the connection is established successfully, I would definitely recommend verifying Salesforce account permissions, just to make sure that you have no troubles doing all the operations later. To get the list of all required Salesforce permissions, please consult with Veeam User Guide. Then you have to define a database where the information will be stored. You can reuse the existing connection to a Postgres server or specify a new one, and then simply create a new database by providing a database name and a label. On the next step of the wizard, you can define custom schedules per Salesforce object. For example, when your entire Salesforce org is backed up daily, you can choose to protect opportunities, contacts, or accounts every 10-15 minutes. Keep in mind that consistent restore of selected objects requires you to have the dependent objects on the same schedule. Here is how I create 30-minute schedule, leave the daily schedule by default, and then apply the newly created 30-minute schedule for backups of accounts and opportunities. Now I'm using the exclusion filters to find an account field which I don't want to protect for data privacy reasons. The next feature allows me to avoid hitting the daily API limit by setting consumption threshold. Available API calls are checked before each policy start and during the session as well. When the threshold is reached, the policy will stop or simply fail to start. As soon as the API limit is renewed and the next policy run attempts to start, the backup operation will resume. On the next step of Backup Policy Wizard, you can optionally enable backup for files and attachments. Selected data will be downloaded to the backup server within the next policy run and kept there according to the retention settings. You can also note here the exact path to file storage on the server. Now it's data encryption at rest and its configuration settings. You can set it up for the most sensitive object fields and file types. By default, you are offered to use encryption keys that are generated by the application itself, but it's very easy to switch to AWS key management service. Keep in mind, those settings are available to backup operator and administrator roles only. In my example, I enable encryption for fields containing sensitive payment data. Then I select two file object types and then show you where to switch from default settings to AWS KMS by providing access key ID and secret access key. If you're enabling encryption for a previously created backup policy, you might want to tick the corresponding checkbox that will start encryption immediately. Let's go ahead to retention options. Since you control the data and the underlying infrastructure, it's up to you to define the data retention. You can separately set retention schedule for objects, files, and file versions, or go with default 1-year setting. As you can see, I've decided to retain all cases in my backup for 10 years. All configuration is pretty flexible. Also, it's recommended to leverage Veeam Backup and application for additional protection of Salesforce data. Feel free to implement the backup copy jobs and use long-term archival on cloud storages in order to maintain 3-2-1 backup rule. At the end of the wizard, don't forget to click Finish to save all the settings and then optionally run the policy if you're in a hurry, or just wait until the backup schedule kicks in. That's it for now. Please watch the other videos in this series to discover more capabilities of this product. Stay tuned. Bye.